All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Brushing Up on Quality 2.0. I'm Brett Norton from Beyond Clean. I'd like to give a special thanks to our event sponsor, 3M, for supporting today's educational event. Their dedication to your education is what helped today's event possible. Lisa Kane is the owner of Dental Office Compliance of New England, LLC. She assists dental practices in compliance standards and regulations required by the state board, OSHA, and the CDC. In her role, Lisa has extensive experience drafting policies and procedures, training employees, and preparing dental offices for on-site inspections by OSHA or the state board. Her extensive knowledge and experience have made Lisa a highly sought-after dental safety consultant. Today, Lisa is going to provide key insights and takeaways to help you achieve success with your next infection control or OSHA visit. Lisa will discuss the latest industry standards and recommendations to ensure your dental office is compliant and inspection ready. Is your dental office in compliance? Get ready to discover the truth today. You'll be glad you tuned into this session. And without further ado, let's welcome Lisa.
Hi, excuse me. Thank you so much, Brad. I really appreciate that. I'm really excited to be doing this. Thank you guys for having me. So here's just a quick about myself. I know he had a really nice intro, but I'm a dentist. I practiced dentistry for about 20 years, and then I stopped because I was getting migraines. So now I do all this stuff that honestly, I never learned any of this in dental school. You know, you learn to wear gloves and PPE and all that stuff, but I never actually realized there were all these rules. So feel free. I will try to pay attention to the chat box. If you have any questions, ask them. We'll talk about sort of the mandatory required things that are pre-COVID, but obviously there's things that have changed. Just, as a heads up, I mean, from what I have, the offices that I'm working with and what I've heard, there have been no COVID outbreaks in any offices that are doing the right thing, that are following infection control guidelines, that are wearing their PPE like they're supposed to, that are following the rules. So that's good. I think that you guys are all in a safer place than, for example, I'll pick on the supermarket. They're not used to wearing PPE. They're not used to wearing masks. It's harder for them to do that kind of stuff than, it is for you. So well done. You guys are doing a good job. The offices that I'm working with that have had outbreaks are all things that have been without PPE or, eating lunch together, that kind of stuff. But we'll talk about all that. Okay. So here are my sources. CDC guidelines. Here is the gorgeous CDC book. You used to not be able to get this, but now you can download 5 free ones from the CDC. Very exciting. So you can get that. That is sort of the general, playbook, I guess, for the CDC and what you need in regards to their rules. Then OSHA is very concerned about bloodborne pathogens for the dental office. They're also concerned about, tripping hazards, falling, all that kind of stuff, fire. But their focus for, dental is bloodborne pathogens. So you have to look at your state so I live in Massachusetts. So in Massachusetts, whatever these people say is law. So even though they're written as guidelines, even though they're written as infection control as recommendations, they're law. So you just have to pay attention to that in your state. And a lot of states have that. They will refer to the guidelines in their laws and say that you have to follow them. Okay, I think this is hysterical, so we have to watch this. Here's my link here. I don't know if I'm going to be able to have noise, but I just think this is really funny. Okay, so when I see that, I think of all the people. I keep on thinking of the guy in the supermarket that is wearing his surgical mask that I think he started day 1 of COVID. It's completely, you can almost see through it. So, I mean, again, you guys are dental. You know how you're supposed to wear PPE. You know that you're not supposed to be like touching your face when you're wearing a mask. You know that you're not like the person that I saw on the street the other day, carrying her shopping bag and wearing gloves and then taking her gloves and scratching her hair and fixing her outfit and all that kind of stuff. You guys know that PPE is like it's almost like you're surgically, scrubbed in. You're not touching anything. And if you touch anything with your PPE, you're going to change your PPE. So why are we doing this besides the fact that you signed up for it? But again, in the dental office, you've always been exposed to hazards. There's hazards everywhere, right? So there's been bloodborne pathogens. Which is not only blood, obviously, that's contagious, but saliva is contagious. There's been, antibiotic-resistant bacteria. There's antifungal-resistant fungi. There's all these other things. There's this idiopathic pulmonary fibrosis that was more prevalent in dental offices. You're exposed to sharps, radiation, chemicals, all that stuff, right? You've always been exposed to that. So you guys always have done all this stuff. Another thing to know is that, again, the healthcare associated infections if you look at some of the, I look all the time on the websites, some of the healthcare associated infections in hospitals have gone up. And that's because they're not following infection control guidelines. So it's what I've noticed going into offices lately is that you guys are doing a great job. You're all focused on all your COVID stuff. But what's happening is you're kind of slacking on sort of the basics. And a lot of those things are, your medical emergency kits, making sure that those are okay, but following like your regular infection control guidelines. And if you read the stuff about why they think healthcare associated infections are increasing in hospitals, it's a lot because of that. And we do not want it to be starting to go to dental. So just kind of go back to your roots. Definitions, dental healthcare personnel, that's you guys. Saliva, as I said, is infectious. For a while, when I had PPE, I had to spell it out. I feel like everyone knows that now. Okay, so here are just some breaches. In Massachusetts, a few years ago, spore testing. If most states, if you're not spore testing per their requirement, which mainly is weekly, and anyone ever came in, you're shut down. I mean, it's just like that. You have to spore test every autoclave. Even if you have an autoclave there that you're not using, if it's there, you're using it. So you have to spore test. You have to have the right kind of spore test documentation. You have to follow, CDC guidelines. You have to have written emergency plans. So like a plan is not just, hey, we're all going to meet at the Dunkin' Donuts over there on the corner and, if there's a fire. The plan is, this is what we're going to do if someone has a heart attack. This is what we're going to do if someone has anaphylaxis. This is what we're going to do if someone has an asthma attack, if someone passes out. Like, just have really specific things, and you cannot have enough training. I'm sure that anyone who went to the previous classes heard this, but I'm going to reiterate this. In California a few years ago, they did pulpotomies with tap water with kids. Humongous infections, pieces of their jaws removed, big deal. Was supposed to go to trial in the spring. Will go to trial whenever they are allowing them back in trial. But this is going to be really big. So we're going to talk about water testing, but like I'm all over. If you do social media, take pictures, test your water, and show that you have nothing in your water, and post this and show everyone and tell your front desk, make sure everybody knows, everybody get ahead of the water game, because this is going to be public. This is going to be on the news. They're going to pay out a ton of money. You want to be ahead of it. You want everyone in your office to be knowing that you're testing and shocking your water, and you are like so set. Same deal. This is someone who passed away in Sweden from a water line infection. And what's interesting about water lines is that if you're supposed to monitor healthcare associated infections in your office, right? So if someone comes in and then next week they have a stomach bug or they have COVID or they have something, they're not going to be able to necessarily tell it came from your office unless you have everyone in your office throwing up or something, right? But what they were able to do is trace the strain of Legionella that was in this woman's lungs to the dental unit that she was just in. So that's super scary. And then another Massachusetts one was in the fall. I mean, OSHA has just really gotten a ton of violations, for COVID-related stuff, because people, not only not following the regular guidelines, but then, everyone stepped it up with respiratory protection. So you basically, if you look at all these OSHA guidelines, it's really fun. You can go online and look at them all. If you don't have a written respiratory protection program, if you're not wearing N95s, if you're not fit testing, if you don't have medical clearance for the people that are fit tested, you could be in trouble. So just keep that all in mind. Okay, I know this is blurry, but we're going to, you don't even really have to read it. I'm just going to talk about it. Okay, so the people on the right are the people that have COVID, that you know that have COVID. Those are people you are never seeing. So always were you supposed to, anybody that came in with anything, if they came in with whooping cough, if they came in with TB, the flu, chickenpox, anything, you're supposed to send them home. All right. If they need emergency care, you send them somewhere that has an airborne isolation room, which would be like a community health center or an emergency room, something like that. It's these people in the middle that these are the main people that you're seeing. So these are people that just come in, they think they're fine, but this is where there's community transmission. So honestly, everywhere now there's community transmission. A couple months ago, we were saying with offices, you got to decide, is the transmission subsided? Is it now? You got to figure out what the story is. But right now, we're all in this middle point. So we're in where there is transmission. So if there's transmission, what OSHA is saying, and OSHA is protecting the employee, they are saying that any aerosol procedure, you are wearing an N95 or higher. That's not a KN95. That's not a surgical mask tied around some fancy way. It's an N95 that has been fit tested, that you are checking on a daily basis. Every time you put it on, that you're doing a seal check. They even are saying if you're not doing an aerosol procedure, they kind of want you to wear an N95. If you can't, fine. But they really, if you look, it says they really, NIOSH certified N95 is recommended. So we'll talk a little bit about that. But N95s, they've kind of changed too. It was, when there was a shortage. So according to OSHA, there's no shortage anymore of N95s. You have enough. You're fine. You're good. It's in other PPE. So whether or not that's an actual situation in your office is another thing, but that's what OSHA thinks. So OSHA is back to, it was always initial fit testing, and it was sort of, not annual. Now they're back to annual because they think that you have enough supply. So the only reason for not doing it was not having enough supply. You have enough supply according to them. And they also don't want you to do what you were doing initially, whereas you were wearing them, holding them out for a week, wearing them again. They want it to be like a one-time deal. So I think unfortunately you guys were trained with N95s thinking that they're a reusable item. I think eventually they will go to one per patient, but right now they're kind of in this gray area, and they're basically saying that you can wear it all morning, but once you take it off, they don't want you putting it back on. And that's because the more you take off and on dirty PPE, the more chance you have to contaminate yourself. So I was always telling people in the beginning to have PPE parties, really practice taking these things on and off. Okay, then the people on the left, no transmission in your area. You do the best, you wear your surgical mask, you do all the stuff you used to do. Okay. Then for this while, the CDC was one place and OSHA was another place, and now they're kind of together. So what the CDC is saying is anywhere there's moderate to substantial community transmission, you want to wear significant eye protection no matter what. So that's not like these safety glasses. They're talking chem lab goggles, real good eyewear or a face shield. And they're saying to wear it all the time. So anytime you're with a patient. So I have an office that I'm working with that somebody, the patient called a couple days later, said I was positive when I was there. And the assistant was, I don't know what she was doing. She was taking films or something that she didn't have eye protection on. And this was pre-vaccine. She's infected. If you're not wearing eye protection and someone tells you that they're positive, you're infected. So the way that the an exposure is it's 15 minutes or more throughout an entire 24-hour period without the proper PPE, or 1 second with an aerosol procedure without the proper PPE. So most of the time in your office, if you're doing what you're supposed to be doing and someone comes in and tells you they're positive, you don't do anything. You obviously are always monitoring for symptoms, but you don't have to do anything. If you are not wearing the proper PPE, you have to. So they want you to do that. They want you to keep social distancing. It's gone from, again, a couple months ago, I was like, okay, everyone that's vaccinated, you can all have lunch together and enjoy yourselves. But now it's back to, don't really take your mask off in the office with anybody else, especially if you have someone at home that's immunocompromised, you have a little kid that's not vaccinated, or you're not vaccinated. You want to be really more careful than, you were a few months ago. Okay, my slides are not moving. Okay, hold on. All right, so this is what I was just saying. This is what an exposure is considered. So if you're wearing all your PPE, you're not exposed. Okay, So infection risk. So we all know your infection risk from sharps, right? You could get poked with something. A sharps injury, though, is only a broken skin. So my skin, you can't see, but it's all broken, right? I have broken, dried skin all over me. If I were to spill blood or saliva on my hands, I have an exposure because it's open. If my hands were like they're supposed to look, then it's not an exposure. If I were to stab myself or puncture myself with an instrument, that's obviously an exposure. Then the next type is direct contact, okay? So that would be, you know, directly contacting something that is infected. We all know that, you know, if you put your hands on something, you know, you're not going to get COVID like that. If you put your hands on something and then you pick your nose or stick your finger in your eyeball, you're going to get, you're going to be exposed. Then, you know, obviously inhalation, so that would be something airborne. Then a contaminated surface. So contaminated surface or a fomite is any surface in the office that is potentially exposed. So what I always think of is once the patient comes into the operatory, I feel like the whole operatory now has cooties. So everything that's in the operatory has to be completely, you know, cleaned up, disinfected, all surfaces changed, you know, all barriers and everything, no matter if you used it or not. And that's why, like, I don't like anything out on the counter, anything reusable. I mean, obviously you're going to have like your keyboard and your mouse and that kind of stuff, but like, I don't want anything out there that has the potential for contaminating and potential for, you know, using on someone else. Okay, here's a chain of infection that's not really a chain, it's just circles. Okay. So reservoir, right? That's the source. So you want to make sure that these circles you can't get from one to another. You want to be able to stop the infection. So if you know that your patient is sick or you are sick, done. Stay home, don't come. A lot of times, obviously, you don't know. So that's where you have to decide, how could you get this infection? Could you get it from breathing it in? Do you have to touch it? You know, whatever. That's your PPE. So for example, utility gloves, when you're working with instruments in the sterilization area, you got to wear them. I know everyone hates them, but they're nicer ones now. So look into them, wear them. They will protect you. That's protecting you from a sharps injury. But all this other stuff, your general normal PPE, hopefully protects you from whatever is transmitted from the patient. Oops, it's not working. Okay, then you have to see the host. So who's most susceptible? You have to not dumb it down, but like get it so the person that is the most susceptible, the most immunocompromised, the youngest child, the oldest person, that person is safe. So if that person is safe, then that, you know, ideally everyone else is safe. So you want to make sure. So that's when you're making sure like your water lines are good, because like your water lines may be fine for, you know, this person over here, but then if you have someone else that's immunocompromised come in, they could have an issue. Okay, so here, as I said, is my favorite book. This is the infection control coordinator is the person in your office that is in charge of all these things. And if you go through like what they say the infection control coordinator is, I mean, it sounds like a daunting job, you know, but you're basically in charge of kind of coordinating all these things. And again, they're not like, you're not making up policies. These things exist. This person has to be named in your documents. You have to have one in your office. So if you don't have one, go back to your office on Monday and pick one and document that you picked this person. The basic theme of everything compliance wise is documentation. And if you document every single thing that you're doing, you are in such a better place. I've been talking a lot to offices about, you know, making sure that, you know, your autoclave tape is changed or that you're actually, you know, using clean instruments, because I've had a few offices now that, you know, have had issues because, you know, all of a sudden they're treating patients and, oh my gosh, now, you know, the tape never changed and now I have to call patients. So I love documentation. I want a few checkpoints. I want when the stuff comes out of the autoclave, I want everyone, your eyes on it. Is the tape changed? Okay. Now when I put it away in the drawer, is the tape changed? Okay. Now, even documenting, you know, when you seat the patient, just say, you know, tape is changed or whatever, you know, have that be on your template or something just to double check, because you do not want to start calling patients. All right. So hand washing, that is the most important thing that you can possibly do. And we all know you can't just go like this and done. You have to really wash your hands inside, thumbs, fingers, whatever. And it actually takes about 20 seconds. And I won't make you listen to this, but here's some songs you can sing. Again, what I always say is don't sing them out loud if you have a bad voice, only in your head. But you can use alcohol-based hand sanitizer if your hands are not visibly soiled. I have real life experience on how this is not good, because what happens is the alcohol breaks down the proteins and it makes it stick to your hands. So I was holding my dog's leg and she had an ID and I guess hand, I don't know what it was. And I got some blood on my hand and then I used hand sanitizer because that was all I had. And like, it just stuck the blood to me. So it is so, so important that your patients see you wash your hands. So if your patients do not see you wash your hands, you have to wash your hands again. Every patient right now wants to see clean hands. And I'm noticing that a lot of patients are freaking out about everything infection control and cleanliness wise, right? So if they come in your office and they don't see things how they think that they should see it, or they don't see you washing your hands, or they see you playing with your hair with your gloves, they're going to either call you out or walk out or call someone else out on it. Okay, so I talked about eyewear. Also, your patient has to wear eyewear. It's always been in this book that your patient has to wear eyewear. Most people don't. So really make sure that you're wearing eyewear. You can get your patient like the cheapest, safety glasses that you possibly can. They don't have to be like the top of the line, but they have to wear them. And honestly, like people are always saying to me, well, my patient doesn't want to wear them or they think they're dirty. But you explain to them how you disinfect in between. And then you also, can explain to them what can happen. All you need is one patient to, dirty water, an instrument, a sharp scaler or etch, some sort of chemical to go in their eye, and you will never not have eyewear in your patients again. All right, I talked about utility gloves. I like to find the ugliest pictures I can. So make sure you're wearing utility gloves. All right, then this has always been a thing too. In the front of your office, you have to have a cover your cough sign upon entry is what it says. It has to be with hand sanitizer, a no-touch trash can, tissues, and masks. And if you don't want to leave some of those things out there, I'm hoping this is okay. I'm telling people they could leave like picture like a little place card like at a wedding that says like masks are available at the front desk or whatever, but because people were stealing things. But you have to have all those elements out there. And honestly, like when I go into offices, maybe I'll have had, I don't know, something in my hand or trash or tissue or something. I want a place to throw it out. And you have to have all those, you have to have these elements there. Okay, so every picture, I'm sure you know this, but every picture that you look at pretty much on social media, on people's websites, on even ads for places, different dental magazines and stuff, their infection control pictures are wrong. So this guy, I like where he was going. Like he listened to the CDC and they said, wear these hardcore goggles. But what happened is he probably put them on and they got all fogged up. So we took them off. So now he is completely exposed. His patient does seem to be wearing glasses, so that's good. Just as a heads up too about that, I'm working with an office that I went on their website and I was like, oh, this is a new office to me. Let me check out that I have this great video. So I looked on the video, and in the video, it was almost like I wanted that video for my classes to show what not to do. So do not make sure, obviously there's HIPAA violations with patients and stuff, but any social media, any videos, any pictures, anything that you do, have someone look at it and make sure, because you do not want OSHA violations public out there. And for a while, I did hear that boards were kind of looking, like if you have your picture up there and your mask is down there and you have gloves on, like I've seen pictures of people with gloves on like this, just double check things and make sure, because you do not want like a blatant, non-compliance issue out there. Okay, this is my favorite game because I made this game. Yeah, so someone said, do I have suggestions to prevent fogging in eyewear? So I think it depends on what the N95s, I think, they're hard because of the fogging. Hopefully, they have a good seal. You need to have a really nice seal. And then hopefully that doesn't prevent fogging. I know there's been things about putting like, you can put some anti-fog things on there. You can put like shaving cream on your glasses. I think if you're wearing a face shield, you know, I get it. I get really hot, so the whole town is sort of fogging. But you know, you try to that hopefully will help a little bit because it's not glasses in there. You know, I think you need, depending on the N95s, like I love this sticky N95 that we always use, and that doesn't, it sits nicely on your nose and stuff, so that doesn't really fog as much. There's no really good answer. I think stay cool and maybe try to do a, you know, some kind of defogger on there. Okay, so is this a necklace? If you were in person, you would all say, oh my gosh, that's a necklace. That's so great. And then you'd look at this and say, oh my gosh, it's not a necklace. So this poor woman was a free picture. I really hope that she's not out there listening to this. Sorry. This is what everyone used to do. I used to do it. You'd come out of, you know, you'd walk the patient to the front, you'd have your mask like that, or you'd be in middle breathing. I think that a lot of that is stopped because everyone's wearing masks all the time. But you know, obviously you see this everywhere outside. So multiple things here. I mean, I never clean my neck after work. I don't know if you guys all do or in between patients. If you do, then you know, good for you. That's great. The other thing is these masks are single use, regardless of COVID, regardless of anything, they're single use. And that's because if you read the instructions for them, they're only good while you can still breathe out of the front part. So what happens is once it gets too hot, there's too much moisture to breathe out of the front part, you start breathing out of the path of least resistance. Well, on a surgical mask, that's up on your nose, that's on the side, on the bottom where it's open. So once you've used up the lifetime, the supply of, you know, this mask, which is about an hour, you have now started breathing out of where there's no mask. So all the people out there that have their masks under their nose, you know, I didn't mean to just roll my eyes, sorry. You know, under their nose, you know, or just like open, so it's so amazingly easy to breathe, are just completely not breathing out of the filtering part. They're breathing just regular air. Okay. So N95s, surgical masks, two separate things. If you put them together and made the perfect surgical N95 respirator, that would be like the 3M blue fluid resistant ones that most dental offices can't get. So now you're left with, you can wear, you know, they're still saying OSHA that you can wear an N95 that is not a surgical N95. You can't wear one with a filter because if you have a filter, you're breathing out dirty air. You're breathing in filtered air, but out dirty air. So you don't want to do that. When we were fit testing, you know, 24/7, you know, last year at this time, I guess not at this time, starting earlier in the summer, people were trying to do all these crazy things. They try to make their surgical masks, like they put a mask fitter and they do all these things to try to get it to fit and be an N95, and you can't. The N95 has different ways of filtering. It has an amazing seal. If you put your N95 on and it smells, it doesn't pass the fit test, you can't, you have to throw it out. You can't wear it. You also have to make sure you have a strap here and a strap here. You can't crisscross straps. It's just not how it's made. You got to follow the rules. Okay, this is my favorite CDC slide because someone at the CDC spent all this time naming all these facial hairs and what you can wear with an N95. And obviously the whole point of this is that the N95 covers over here and you can't have anything blocking. You can't get a good seal if you have facial hair. You just can't. Okay, and I think we talked a little bit about this. When you're wearing PPE, you have to be really cognizant of what you're doing. If you have a routing slip, if you have anything, you can't put that on your dirty PPE. And especially like the people at the front desk, they only have masks, you know, and plexiglass or eye protection or something, but they don't have gloves. You don't want to be giving them things that are dirty. So really be aware of what you're doing with your hands, with your PPE, and don't be afraid to wash your hands again or change your gloves. So we'll just talk quickly about your basically PPE on, you wash your hands before you put your gloves on last. Basically, you're probably going to wear most of this as you walk into the patient's room. It's a little different than before, but PPE is only for clinical areas. There is no PPE in the bathroom, in the lunchroom, at the front desk, in the doctor's office, only clinical areas. And then to take it off, you're going to inside out it and only touch the insides of the gown and stuff, and that will help prevent cross-contamination. And if you're going to reuse your gowns, I would much rather see you just leave it on as much as you can, because the more you take it on and off, the more chance of contaminating you or somebody else. And again, the last thing you do and the first thing you do is wash your hands. Okay, so this is ideally, right, you want to eliminate any hazards. So if you said, all right, here on out, we are no longer working on patients. So you've completely eliminated bloodborne pathogens, unless you're going to like start poking each other or whatever. So that's great, but that you can't do that. So in dentistry, you can't eliminate things. The next best thing is substitution. So you would substitute. So maybe you find this disinfectant that's fantastic, that's so much safer for you to be using. So you're going to substitute. The next step would be engineering controls. And those are things like sharps containers, needle recapping devices. Those are things that physically remove a hazard. So you need to have engineering controls. And you also, which a lot of people don't know, is you need to test every single year a new engineering control and write it up. You don't have to say that you like it. It could be something that's so much more cumbersome, but you have to try. And that's because like you don't want to be using something from 1925 or whatever when you were in dental school or hygiene school or assisting school or wherever you were. You don't want to, new things that maybe are better and more efficient and safer for you have come around. So you want to try that. Then you have administrative or work practice controls, and those change the way you're doing a task. So the big thing is that nobody does is taking instruments from the operatory to the sterilization area in a covered, snappable, closed container with a biohazard sticker on it. You just have to do that. No one does it, or very few people do it. It doesn't have to be a dental container. It can be, dollar store, snappable, Rubbermaid, whatever. Just get something that if you were to walk in the halls and you trip or someone were to bump into you, you're not going to all have an exposure incident. Also, administrative controls are, retracting with not your finger, retracting with a mirror, or not bending the needle, or not passing the needle unsheathed to somebody else, like things that we used to do when I started. But those are administrative controls. And then when you do all of these things, you say, what kind of PPE do I need? And unfortunately, no matter what you do, you are going to have all your PPE. Sorry, because you still are working on those patients. If those patients weren't there, it'd be so much better. Okay, this is what offices used to look like, and I used to go in and cringe. Now, since COVID, the only good thing for COVID for me was that people got rid of this stuff. So nothing should be out. I mean, to me, I look at those cotton rolls, and now they're all dirty because they're all open and they're all contaminated. You'll see some bottles. One thing says alcohol in Russian, but anything out there that is not in its original container has to be labeled, and it has to be labeled with a globally harmonized symbol, which I'll show you what that is, and the hazards and what you do if you get in your eyes, if your mouth, whatever. There's significant things that have to be on there, but everything not in its original container has to be labeled. And you could get really cool chemical resistant labels like I have and do it there. It's so much fun. Okay. Sterilization area. Obviously, everyone's sterilization area is this big and has all these spaces, I know. But you just need separate spaces. There should be nothing clean on top of anything dirty. I've seen a lot of that lately for some reason, and I think it's obviously because of storage difficulties, but everything goes from dirty to clean. You'll see here there's that handpiece maintenance machine. That has to be a little bit even more on the dirty side, because even if those are shut, no matter what brand they are, they do spew out some, aerosols. So that should be on the dirty side as much as possible. All right. Things are not allowed to be taken out of the autoclaves until they are completely dry because of wicking. So wicking is if something is wet and you touch it with your finger or you put it out on the counter or leave it somewhere, it's going to absorb or get sucked in any dirt that's coming from the towel you put it on, the air, your hands. So you have to have, everything has to be completely dry. Foil test. Most people are not doing this. This is the cheapest, easiest test I think you can do in your office. You do this knowing that the ultrasonic is a cesspool, right? So it is not cleaning anything. It is just shaking everything off and leaving all the dirt in there. So if you're not wearing utility gloves and you are playing with instruments and wiping them or something, and you get a poke, you've now gotten a poke with all the patients that you've had that day. So just keep that in mind. It's kind of gross. Okay, so the foil test. I like to do the foil test in the morning with just water in it so that you're not, because you can't put the cap on. You take a piece of tin foil, hold it in for like 15, 20 seconds, not touching any of the sides, and you want even pitting across. If you get even pitting, great. If you're getting no pitting, which I've done a couple offices now, we've got in because I'm like, I've never really done a foil test, so let's see what it looks like. And they got nothing. So your ultrasonic always makes that annoying noise, but it doesn't mean it's working. Okay, so this Spalding guy made all these classifications, which he spent a lot of time on, which I'm really happy for him, good for him. However, they're kind of irrelevant now. The rule is it's autoclavable or it's single use. Obviously, you're not throwing out your X-ray sensors, you're covering them, that kind of stuff. But literally everything else, if you can't autoclave it in between patients, you are not using it on more than one patient. And then, so someone just asked about a detergent. So soaking in something. So I like that if you're not going to get to your instruments right away, that you put them in some sort of enzymatic solution and let it hang out there. If you're gonna ultrasonic your instruments right away, I'm cool with you just sticking them in there, but you know, or the instrument washer. Obviously, if you're noticing that all your instruments are completely caked on with things, or you're using things that like are not coming off, then you're gonna need some other kind of pre-soak that's gonna be able to help that out. Okay, so here's just an example of 2 trays that had completely gone through the autoclave cycle, and one's wet and one's dry. They have to look like the ones on the right. And part of how you can do that is the autoclave takes in and out the same amount of water. So if you don't dry your instruments before they go into the autoclave, you're gonna have wet instruments come out. I mean, obviously some autoclaves don't dry as well, so you have to kind of wait, but that's one little tip for that. Okay, so there's 3 kinds of indicators. They all go for time, temperature, and pressure, right? Everything has to be in the autoclave for a certain amount of time, at a certain temperature, under a certain pressure. Mechanical are the gauges on the machines. The chemical would be the, usually it's one, you know, indicator like temperature. Sometimes it's more than that. You know, there's a few different versions of it. That just kind of tells the difference between processed and unprocessed. And then biological would be the spore test. So that would tell if that, you know, spores were able to grow, if you're actually killing all the organisms or whatever's in there. So everything has to be passing a biological indicator test. There's other things, there's these class 5 integrators that are very similar to a biological indicator, but don't fly in the United States yet as that. But you want to make sure that you're checking all of these things for everything. And then again, this is completely wrong. Shame on this rwmt.com company. Anything that is hinged in an sterilization pouch has to be in the open position. It just can't, it can't get clean if it's like that. Okay, so I know you probably listened to this already, but underneath your dental unit is a whole world of tubing. It is the perfect storm for biofilm to form. You do not want biofilm because things attached to it, then they start flying around and get in people's mouth. So there's things that you need to do. So you need to put some maintenance in your water, and that has to be like a daily maintenance. You want to flush all your lines 20 seconds in between every patient. Obviously, in the morning, you're going to flush your lines also. And then you're going to, depending on what it says, if it some bottles, you know, some straws want you to leave it in the water and some want you to empty the bottle. So it's always kind of deferring to the instructions for use. But you want to shock and clean and shock and test. So the thing is that there's the way that the CDC in this little book here tells you, it says on a regular basis. They've done a lot of testing on it. The best results and the people that get the best, you know, cleanest water, test and shock quarterly. And you just have to do it. You're going to, again, it is going to be public. People are going to know about water shocking and testing and how important it is. And you're just going to make sure that you do it. And you're going to document that you're doing it. And if you're doing something like this in your office, I'm a big fan of taking pictures of it, showing that you're doing it, right? This is just showing you that even if you have treatments, if you have tablets, if you have straws, it doesn't pass 100% of the time. So you still have to do it. And if you look at the instructions, it used to be like the chairs would say, you know, just do it sometime, or these would be like, you're good for a year. All of them have sort of changed. So, you know, you're safest and best to just test and shock quarterly. I'm sure you've gotten this before, but here's just a deal that ProEdge gives if you want to get cheaper quick passes. Okay, I know you can't read this, but the point of this is that you got to know your disinfectant. So all these things on the right, those are the little globally harmonized symbols. Those are the new symbols that they created that are non-intuitive to me, but it's intuitive to someone, I guess. The next thing is the cleaning claim. So that's 1 step or 2 steps. So you need to know your product. Is it a 1-step product? Is it a 2-step product? How long is the kill time? That's the other number. So right now, all your disinfectants have to be on list N of the EPA's website. And that is, it has an emerging viral pathogen claim. And some of the kill times have changed. So you really have to double check that. You have to keep your surfaces wet for the entire amount of the kill time. If your kill time is 3 minutes and you're using 1 wipe for the one operatory and some stuff is just being wet for like 10 seconds, you're not disinfecting. So you really have to test your product and make sure that you actually have, you're actually disinfecting and cleaning. Okay, again, people are not doing the right thing. So this woman, obviously her mask is not on the right way. And people have a hard time catching this other one, but her hair, like you do not have long hair for dentistry. You can have it, but you need to put it up. You do not have your hair done for your dental procedure. This guy too, he spent a lot of time covering his watch, but first of all, his patients aren't wearing glasses, right? I'm not sure what kind of tool he's using and what he's doing, but that's different. But his arm, never mind that he doesn't have PPE on, that he's just wearing like regular clothes and he has no gown and he has short sleeves, but his arm is resting on her. So if you have the habit of resting your arm on someone or scooching them up against your stomach or something, or like if you're touching your patient, you're probably touching more than one patient. So that means that you need to be careful. You need to be careful before you, how you're using your PPE. If you're reusing it, you want to make sure that you're not contaminating one patient to another. Someone asked, does the surface need to be cleaned before it can be disinfected? So yes, obviously we talked about, it has to, you can't have like schmutz all over it, but you have to read the instructions because a lot of the products, some of them are 1 step and some of them are 2 steps. So some of them want you to wipe down the surface first. Some of them want you to just go with it. They were in the beginning of COVID, they were having everyone wipe down everything with soap and water first and then using their disinfectant. And a lot of the disinfectants too also have things like, you have to clean the surface. This is not this, but you have to clean the surface and just, wipe it down to get rid of the residue. But if your surface has any actual dirt on it, you would definitely have to get rid of that because disinfectants and wipes don't clean underneath things. Just like in your dishwasher, the food would get caked on. It's not cleaning underneath there. Okay, so at the end of this book, there is a checklist. See? But CDC made it easy for you. So there's an app too. You have to do this at the end of the year and you have to document it. So if you're documenting it, if you're doing it this way, I want you to like email it to yourself or something. Make sure that you have a copy of it because if you're not documenting that you're doing it, you're not doing it. Okay, so we'll just talk a little bit specifically about OSHA. So OSHA basically, their goal obviously is to make the employee safe. If they get a complaint, they have to check it out. They can't ignore it. And if they call you or email you, you will post in your office whatever the complaint is until you fixed it. That's not joyful. Then depending on what the thing is, if someone calls up OSHA and says that, I don't know, there was like a little dirt on the floor, well, like OSHA may be like, all right, fine, clean up the dirt, show me a picture that it's clean, done. If someone calls and says, you know what, my doctor, that went into the office and they weren't wearing gloves when they were treating me, OSHA is going to get a little bit more concerned and they're potentially going to call like your state board or they'll come in. OSHA is allowed with this national emphasis program to come into any dental office or anywhere that they think is unsafe. So they think dental offices are on their list of high risk places, despite me saying that, you're actually pretty safe there. They're allowed to come in. I have not heard of them coming into any dental offices yet, but they have free reign too. And so, as I said before, they've gotten over $4 million worth of fines since COVID, and they are almost 100% respiratory protection. They're not fit testing. They're not doing medical clearance. They're not having a written respiratory protection program. They're not having hazard communication that's like stickers, not emergency training, stuff like that. They stopped counting for some reason in January, but it was fun watching that rack up. Okay. So another thing is the OSHA book, the exposure control plan. That's great. When we go into offices and look, a lot of people have them and they just have them straight up from the ADA and they're there and they're just not personalized at all. It has to be completely personalized to your office. As I said, naming the infection control coordinator, but not only that, all your stuff is in there and it all has to be personalized. So you have to make sure it's like that, and it has to be updated every year. A lot of people also, offices do not have enough training, don't have the right PPE, or they're not wearing PPE. There's no way to get out of wearing PPE. And that's what a lot of people asked in the beginning of this too. They were like, can't you get me a form that says that I'm accepting the risk and I don't want to wear an N95? And no, I called OSHA, and OSHA, according to them, you can't. It's a requirement if you're doing, certain procedures, that you have to wear certain PPE. And if you can't, they want you to like sanction your employee and write it up. And, they have to, you can't get out. If you refuse to wear the right PPE, you can't be clinical. So this is just showing you like OSHA is a big deal. Like it is a really good idea to have someone, check and make sure what you're doing is what you're supposed to be doing, because if you get OSHA violations, they get really expensive. So this is just a sort of an example of some of the record-keeping things that you need to have that all have to be personalized. So all your logs have to be personalized. As I said before, your sterilization, your sport test log, you have to have a really nice, comprehensive in-office sport test log. You can't just say, yep, sport tested. It has to have I have an office I'm working with that had an issue with that they didn't have the right kind of in-office sport test log. They were sending it out and had documentation of sending it out, but not the in-office stuff. So you got to have all of that. You should have standard operating procedures for everything. My favorite thing is I am a little bit addicted to Starbucks. So I went in and I went in at a shift change. And what the coolest thing happened was that someone was making someone's drink, and then that person went on their break. And then someone else just came in and there were no questions asked. Nobody said, okay, where are you? What is this? What are you making? What are you doing? They knew exactly, because of where things were, how they were done, how to finish that drink and make it the right way. So I get it. You're not Starbucks and you don't have drinks, but it was really cool, because that's how I want your office to run. I want everything to be the same. So like if you have to run out to go do something, or your patient is taking longer to check them out or something, I want someone else to know that, okay, I walk into that operatory, and because the instruments are here, or because the instruments aren't in here, I know what step this person is at, and I know what needs to be done to get this room right. Or I know that leaving the instruments over here means that in the sterilization area, that they've already been through the hydrum or the ultrasonic or whatever. And, I want everything the same and consistent. And I really want people because I feel like you work better as a team if everyone knows what's going on. Not only do I want that, you're supposed to have written standard operating procedures. Okay, so these are the globally harmonized symbols that I talked about before. And as I said, you have to label all containers. We're going to just quickly go over safety data sheets. So they used to be material safety data sheets. Now they're safety data sheets. So the sections you want to look at are 2, 4, 6, and 8. So 2 has the little symbols that you want. Section 4 is first aid. So if you get it in your eye and your nose, like what you have to do. Safety data sheets are supposed to be, they say they can be digital, but they have to have no barrier to access at all. Desktops, and they have to be available if there's a power outage, and they have to be available if I get something in my eye. I should be able to just grab the SDS and go run out to the emergency room, or have someone drive me, I guess, if I got something in my eye. But they, so they do have to be printed out. Section 6 is if it accidentally releases, do you have to run? Do you need to get ventilation? Can you put something on it? Can you clean it up? What do you do? And then section 8 is sort of the most important part for you for every day. You should be going over, you should all have at your safety meetings, kind of pick like, okay, here are my 5 most used chemicals. What respiratory protection do I need? What, gloves do I need? What do I need? And make sure you're doing the right thing, because that was just isopropyl alcohol and you need like hardcore gloves and respiratory protection. So really make sure you know your product. And especially too, when the front desk was disinfecting things, it stressed me out, like when they were not wearing PPE or doing the right thing. Okay. Labels, you cannot label too much. Everything that's potentially biohazard has to be labeled a biohazard. If you have a biohazard underneath the sink, a biohazard box, you need to label the cabinet outside the sink. Food, so many times, I know you guys get hot, I know you get thirsty, I know you want to drink, but they can't be in any clinical area. They have to be in areas where they're non-clinical. So it can't be anywhere where there's risk of causing an infection. So with waste too, like if OSHA were to come in and see the laundry like this or the trash like this is an OSHA violation. You can't have things like this. Also, sharps containers can't be overfilled. There has to be in your logs, checking sharps containers and checking these things. So regulated waste or medical waste is anything you would squeeze and either blood or saliva would come out. So anything at risk causing an infection or would like flake off. So I feel for offices, I went into an office and I just felt so bad because they must have been paying so much money for biohazard waste, as they threw everything in there. So if something had piece of paper, had like a little bit of something on it, blood, saliva, that was dried and not even barely there, they were throwing that in the biohazard waste. So they're two separate things. Anything that is potentially causing an infection needs to go in the biohazard. All right, so this woman, I think, well, obviously her patient isn't wearing glasses. I think she's not wearing a mask, but is wearing a face shield. I mean, we've all seen people do this, so this is not protecting you. This guy, I just love him because I don't know what he's doing, but this is just so wrong. So not only, there's so much wrong with this, but he's short sleeves, he's leaning over his patient. And again, it just makes me think of, if he's doing this with one person, he's probably doing this with other people and probably contaminating all the people from there on out. You guys have to have adequate training and documentation. So again, with everything, if you're not documenting it and writing it down, you're not doing it. So that's just sort of how that goes. So make sure that the documentation is how it needs to be. And that is it. So if you guys have any questions, want to call me and anything, no question is too stupid. But if you guys have any questions now, I can take some questions if anyone has any.
All right. Thanks, Lisa. That was great.
Thanks.
Yeah, I think when it comes to the world of COVID that we live in nowadays, and how last year at the beginning of the pandemic and how dental offices shut down, right? There was no standard, and there was so many different recommendations coming out from the CDC, and there was just a lot of minutia out there and a lot of confusion on how to operate an office safely and to make your patients feel comfortable. So I think from a historical perspective, from last year until now, what are the main or major changes you've seen as in regards to adoption with, the new guidelines, and how often do you see issues in the offices that you visit?
The first thing, as I said before, the first thing I've noticed is that people are paying attention more to what they have out, and getting rid of probably stuff that they should have done before. So, people are really kind of being more aware of the aerosol potential for contamination and, keeping track of that. So I like that. As far as like PPE and stuff, people are, it's really just the N95s and the lab coats or the gowns that people maybe weren't wearing before. I think it's kind of just a reset for people to be making sure they're wearing their PPE and doing what they're supposed to be doing. Also, obviously, there's the things, you're screening patients and you're screening yourselves, and, there's air purifiers and plexiglass and stuff. But really, you're basically just, besides that you're wearing some sort of respiratory protection all the time, everything's the same. There's not much that's different. There's obviously, you're adding the respiratory protection, the fit test and that stuff that wasn't in there, but you're doing everything sort of the same. And a lot of people say to me, they want to make sure that their patients are vaccinated or whatever, but it doesn't, from my perspective, it doesn't even matter, because when you had an HIV patient or something, you weren't, doing something special for them. You were doing standard precautions. So now you're doing, you're kind of stepping up a little bit with transmission based because, you have the N95, but you're not treating anybody any different or doing anything any different. I don't know if that really answered your question, but
yeah, I think I think it's a great answer. I mean, it's I of course went to the dentist before I was vaccinated, and I felt completely safe. I think what this has done, this whole environment that we're in, is emphasize the need for best practice in following guidelines that have already been, lined out for years. And so I think that it's just a way to get people to just adopt those practices in a more frequent manner. On the patient side, if by chance, they see something or they're not comfortable with a certain, how things are going, what would you recommend? How would you recommend they speak with, the hygienist or the front office if they notice something that's concerning to them?
I mean, I think they be honest about it. I mean, I think this whole thing, not aggressive about it, but honest. I mean, some offices, so, you can either put barriers or you cannot put barriers on things. Like it's an either or, right? A lot of offices don't want to have all the waste and don't want to put headrest covers on and all the plastic, right? So I always tell offices that do that to make a little sign out in the front and say, we're trying to help the environment. We are still doing all the infection control things we were supposed to do. And, but this is what we're doing. So I'm thinking if a patient comes in and they see something, maybe if they talk to the doctor or talk to the front desk and say, why is this? There's a really simple sort of making sense, having nothing to do with infection control reason that might make the patient feel better. Like I would rather the patient does that than goes and just calls OSHA and it's like, oh my gosh,
Yep.
So yes. I mean, that's my thought.
Yep. No, it's just a gentle push or say, hey, I'm just a little concerned, and get the explanation front and center, because oftentimes it can get answered at the office itself.
Yeah, exactly.
Here's a good question from Rebecca. What's the best way to get the rest of the staff to be compliant with PPE?
I mean, I think education is the best way to do everything. I think you have to present it in the right way. I think coming in and being like, you have to do this, 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 and go and you're in trouble is maybe not the best way. I think explaining and sort of going deeper, obviously today we went super broad, but kind of going deeper into something and saying, okay, so this is why you're wearing the PPE. This is what could happen to you if you don't wear the PPE. Here's an here's an example of someone who didn't wear PPE, and this is what happened to them. Just kind of education. I mean, the whole, again, the eye infection education. You show someone some pictures of people that had some bad eye situations, I guarantee you no one is ever not going to wear glasses again. So, it's not necessarily scare tactic. It's more explanation and teaching. And then, and I hate to say this, but dentistry in itself has always been a risk profession, right? So you're always been exposed to stuff. So if it's too much for them, maybe they're not necessarily in the right profession. I think a lot of people realize that during this, but I think that if they can't handle it, or if they don't want to do it and don't want to protect themselves, then, I think I just told all your people to quit, but that's not what I mean, because I know it's.
Well, there's that great video that I think everybody has seen, if saliva were red.
Yeah, I have that in here, but it wouldn't link. So
yeah, and I've seen that one, and it's pretty eye-opening as to the amount of fluids that can be dispersed in a small space. And I think just sitting through that, you recognize, well, yeah, we need to make sure that we're safe. We're using the adequate PPE. We're masked up. We have gloves. We're not short sleeved and leaning on the patient. And then it also hammers home the point of making sure that the area around you is clean, right? With disinfectants and after each patient, it's a changeover, and you say if you have a busy office, you want to make sure that you're following best practice, and you're not just saying, okay, next, and we did a quick wipe down. You need to follow the contact times, and
and you want to be in an office that really values infection control. You know, someone who's going to maybe give your appointment an extra 10 minutes so that you can actually do what you need to do and not, you know, be all about like, okay, come on, come on, come on. You know, I mean, I think that yes, in the, you know, in your head, it may think that like production is less, but I don't think in reality it's that. I think that you will get more patient buy-in and more people that will be happier with your product. And I think ultimately it will be better for the office.
Yep. No, I completely agree. Well, I think we are at time here. So, Lisa, once again, I want to thank you for joining us today. It's been great hearing your point of view from, you know, just giving some real good explanation on what OSHA is looking for and helping the dental hygienists and just, you know, I think in general, making sure that people are adhering to best practices. It's, if you got repetition and you got a standard operating procedure, it's something that really can be just administered and built into your daily routine. And I think it's, you know, it gets easy once you implement it. So
yeah, you should dream infection control like I do.
Right.
That's everyone's goal.
Yep. So thanks again, Lisa.
Thank you.
One thing that I want to point out is if you have any additional questions you'd like to ask Lisa, her contact information can be found in the speaker bio tool in the lower right hand of your screen. There will be a short 15-minute break before our next session, but just a quick reminder, you will be automatically transferred to the survey page for access to the conference survey and CE certificate after today's conference. All of today's sessions will be available on demand to share and view after the live event has concluded. Thanks again for joining us today, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you.